Hello everyone, I am Jess with Simply Sourdough by Jess. This video is going to be all about baking my beginner sourdough bread recipe from beginning to the very end. I'm going to take you through each step of my method from feeding your starter all the way to the very end. Want my beginner friendly recipe? Comment below, I will send it to you and you can follow along. Deciding how much you want to feed your starter. Take a couple things into consideration whenever you're trying to decide when and how much to feed your starter. So, how much time do you have? Because depending on how much you feed it will depend on how quickly it will rise. So you don't want to feed it and you go to work and by the time you come back it's going to have risen and gone back down before you even get home. So if you are going to be home and kind of in a rush to do it, then feed it minimum equal parts. So if you have 1/2 of a cup of starter, feed it 1/2 a cup of flour, 1/2 cup of water. Again, depending on temperature, it will rise somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. If you are going to be gone at work all day and you want to feed it before you leave, at its peak by the time you get home, then feed it 5 times the amount of starter that you start off with. Give it lots of food so that it will be eating all day while you're at work and you come home and it's ready to use. Example, you have 50 grams of starter, feed that 5 times. So 250 grams of flour, 250 grams of water. That in my temperature here at my house typically takes between 9-10 hours. So by the time you get home, it's at its peak and it's ready and you just go ahead and start making math in baking, okay? So I need 65 grams for my recipe. How do I get 65 grams of active starter? So the amount of starter that you have plus the amount of flour and water that you feed it, that equals your total active starter. So if I start off with 10 grams of starter and I feed that 50 grams of starter of water and 50 grams of flour, 50 plus 50 plus 10, that's going to give me a total of 110 active grams of starter. So that's how you will know. So that gives me enough 65 grams for my recipe and a little bit left over so that I can go ahead and put back in my fridge to be ready to feed for next time. So always make sure you have a little bit left over. So overcalculate just a little bit so continually stick back in your fridge and continually feed and always have starter available. We're back in the kitchen now. I'm kind of in a rush. I don't want to be doing this and it's morning time and I just want to do it today and I'm going to let it rise all night, my actual dough. So I want it to rise within 4 to 5 hours. So I am going to start off with 25 grams of starter and I'm going to feed it equal parts. So 25 grams of flour, 25 grams of water. That's going to give me 25 plus 25 plus 25. It's going to give me a total of 75 grams of active starter. Enough for my recipe, which is 65 grams plus 10 left over to refeed later. Now, I want you to know that I typically do not feed that minimum 1-1-1 ratio. I always feed at minimum double, but because I'm in a rush, I'm gonna go ahead and feed it this equal parts. Doing this will not harm it. It's just you don't wanna do that minimum 1-1-1 ratio for an extended period of time because that will barely be giving it enough food and over a long period of time, it will weaken your starter and slowly overly acidify it and it will just start to become sluggish after a couple months. So you don't want to do that. But in this situation, I'm in a rush. It's just the one time. I have a new, fresh, clean jar. This is starter that I have just taken out of the fridge. It's been in the fridge for a couple days. So in my new jar, I have my scale. I'm going to put in here 25 grams. That was my decision. So I'm going to put 25 grams of my cold starter from the fridge is fine. To stir my starter in water first, just to make sure it gets nicely mixed first before I go in with my flour, but you don't have to. With the 25 grams of flour. This is just organic, unbleached, unenriched, all-purpose flour. Down the edges as best you can. This is the consistency you're looking for. It's pretty much pancake batter, maybe slightly thicker. So scrape down the edges just as best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, I'm gonna stick my bread cover on. Check this out. Is this not adorable. These actually will be available coming soon for purchase on my website. These are gonna be handmade, not by me, but by my mother who is in Texas. Anyways, okay, so cover it and mark your level with whatever. A marker, you can use a rubber band. I don't feel like looking for a rubber band, so I am just going to mark the level it started off. Well, that's terrible. The level it started at here, so I can know when it's doubled. 10:09 a.m. I've fed it, I've marked it, and I'm gonna keep this, since I am in a rush and I want it to rise quickly, I'm gonna keep it in my oven with the light on. It typically stays a nice little cozy 80 degrees in there. So I want this to rise in 4 hours. So we'll come back and check on it in 4 hours.